Welcome back to the final installment of Tragedies at the Fair. Today we're stepping into the last 25 years to explore how county and state fairs have transformed, growing, evolving, and redefining what it means to celebrate tradition in a modern world. And with modern technology, you would think that we would have less incidents. But here you are, listening to Death Kiss Traveler. I'm your morbidly curious host, Marissa, and if you are loving this podcast, please help support me and give me a 5-star review, share with your friends, and make sure you subscribe. I give you new episodes every Friday. Thank you for listening. Let's jump into our story. Warning, this podcast includes death, disasters, and ghost stories, and may not be suitable for young children. Listener discretion is advised. Despite their nostalgic roots, modern county and state fairs are anything but stuck in the past. Over the last 25 years, these beloved community traditions have evolved and thrived, embracing inclusivity, diversifying entertainment, and blending old-fashioned charm with cutting-edge technology. From heritage horse races making a comeback to food courts featuring flavors from around the world, today's fairs are cultural cornerstones. They balance tradition with innovation, bringing people together year after year for celebration, connection, and a little bit of magic. There was a time, not so long ago, when fair rides were clunky, loud, and just a little bit unpredictable. You'd step onto a tilt-a-whirl with a metal lap bar and a whole lot of faith. These lights were dim, their motors growled, and the only thing keeping you in your seat was gravity and grit. But in the last 25 years, something changed. The rides just didn't go faster. They got smarter. Suddenly, the Ferris wheel wasn't just a circle in the sky. It was a light show, choreographed to music, pulsing in your chest. The zipper still flipped like it always had, but now it moves smoother, quieter, more like a machine in a sci-fi film than a carnival throwback. Hidden deep in the steel frames are sensors, tiny digital guardians that monitor every movement, checking for vibrations, stress points, even weather conditions. Rides now think before they spin. They know when to stop, and when they don't, systems are in place to stop them for you. And while some rides have vanished, new beasts have arrived. Towering pendulums that swing 100 feet in the air. Vertical drops so steep they make your heart stall. Virtual reality rides that take you through space battles while you sit on a traveling trailer. The modern fair ride is a marvel, folding itself up into a trailer by midnight and reappearing like magic in a new town the next day. Sleek, safer, smarter, but always chasing that same goal: to make your heart race, your stomach drop, and your spirit rise, if only for a moment. Despite all the new safety tech, the reinforced restraints, and the promises of rigorous inspections, there's still a reason I don't trust fair rides. It's not the height, it's not the speed. It's the fact that these rides are taken apart and rebuilt over and over again, like giant traveling puzzles. Sometimes in the rain, sometimes in a rush, sometimes by crew working through the night to make opening day. Bolts get stripped, welds wear down, and corrosion, it hides in the places no one looks. Until it's too late. Because no matter how advanced the rides become, it's still being folded up, packed onto a trailer, and reassembled town after town. And that alone should make you think twice before you climb aboard. It was a beautiful evening of August 4th, 2007, and the historic Festival of Lodges was alive with summer magic. For centuries, this beloved fair had brought joy to the people of Saint-Germain, just outside of Paris. Laughter echoed beneath the treetops. Music drifted from game stalls. The scent of sweet crepes and roasting meat filled the air. Towering above it all, like a mechanical giant, loomed the Booster, a 28-ton thrill ride with an enormous arm that spun riders high into the sky, flipping them through dusk like rag dolls on strings. It was one of the fair's most dramatic centerpieces. At 6:50 p.m., a large family made their way to the ride platform. In one gondola, a 48-year-old father and his 21-year-old son seated side by side. Just across from them in the same cabin sat two more family members, the boy's uncle and teenage brother. They were secured, braced for adrenaline, unaware that their lives were about to shatter. Then a sound. A sickening crack tore through the evening air. It wasn't the usual whirl of machinery. It was sharper. And then chaos. One of the gondolas, with 4 passengers inside, ripped free from the Booster's massive arm. Mid-spin, at full velocity, the cabin plummeted from the sky like a meteor and slammed into the podium below with deadly force. The father and son were killed instantly. The 2 others were critically wounded, injured before the horrified eyes of their family, who watched everything unfold in real time. Witnesses described hearing the scream of metal, then an agonizing, surreal silence. The ride stopped, but it wasn't over. High above, 2 other passengers in the opposite gondola were left dangling, trapped nearly 120 feet in the air for 5 hours. They remained suspended while firefighters worked to reach them, eventually rappelling from above to bring them down. The investigation would later uncover chilling truths. The ride, manufactured by Italy's Fabri Group and assembled by a subcontractor, BCM, had passed visual inspections. But what lay hidden beneath non-removable panels told a different story. Welds were missing, and others were dangerously poor in quality. An expert who examined the wreckage called it the worst I've ever inspected, and said the accident was not just possible, it was inevitable. In the aftermath, justice came. The manufacturer and subcontractor were both sentenced to 2 years of suspended prison time. The operator who ran the ride that day received 1 year suspended. Combined fines totaled hundreds of thousands of euros, but no fine could match the loss. The family, devastated and forever altered, gave powerful testimony during the trial. They spoke not just of grief, but of the trauma etched into their lives that day. The memory of the fall, the loss, the aftermath. This was no legend, no ghost tale. This was real, and it was preventable. And our next story was on the first night of the 2017 Ohio State Fair, the kind of night heavy with the scent of funnel cakes and fried butter. Teenagers laughed, music blared, the midway glowed under the humid golden dusk of late July. But above it all loomed the fireball, a beast of steel and motion. The fireball was a thrill-seeker's dream, a giant pendulum that hurled riders 40 feet into the air, while spinning at 13 revolutions per minute. 6 rows of 4, 24 people strapped in. The machine groaned, creaked, screamed with power. Then there was silence, and no one forgets the sharp, metallic rip, the kind of sound that shreds time in half. Without warning, the entire row of seats tore loose mid-swing. Witnesses described it as if the ride had exploded. Bodies flew, hurled like rag dolls through the air, then slammed against the unforgiving midway. 18-year-old Tyler Jarrell, newly enlisted in the Marines, landed hard. He died on impact, his bright future crushed beneath the rusted steel. His girlfriend, Keziah Lewis, lay broken nearby, alive, but barely. Bones shattered, others screamed in agony. Blood soaked into the dirt where only moments before there had been laughter. And the ride? The fireball groaned to a halt, a brutal monument to a secret no one saw coming. An 18-year-old beam, quietly corroding from the inside, had failed. Beneath thick paint and steel lies, rust had eaten away at its core, a ticking time bomb. And no one knew. Ohio shut down the fairgrounds that night. Governor Kasich called it the worst tragedy in Fair's history. But what came next was even more disturbing. The Dutch manufacturer KMG discovered that internal corrosion had been present for years. They knew as early as 2012 that this ride was vulnerable. But they said nothing. No warnings, no bulletins, just silence. 43 fireball rides were grounded around the world. But for Tyler, it was too late. His mother now carries the weight of his legacy. She championed Tyler's Law, a cry from a grieving heart to force real inspections, not just checklists, but deep, scientific scrutiny of rides we trust with our lives. Lawsuits followed. Keziah was awarded $20 million. Settlements rose to nearly $78 million, but money cannot erase trauma. It cannot reverse time. It cannot rebuild what was lost. And then, another death. Jennifer Lambert, another victim, died a year later. Her brain injury slowly drained the life from her body. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was a failure of vigilance, and that when maintenance is left to assumptions, what's left behind is blood on the pavement. The fireball didn't just swing that night. It severed lives. It split the summer sky with screams and sorrow. The air was thick with cotton candy, diesel, and nostalgia. It was opening day, July 29th, 2001, at the Medina County Fair, a Midwestern staple. And nestled between livestock, barns, and funnel cake stands stood a relic from another era, a 1918 Case steam traction engine, polished to blackened gleam. It wasn't just a machine, it was history. Massive, humming, alive, its operators were proud men, collectors, hobbyists, and guardians of forgotten power. Among them, Cliff Koviak, 46, his son William Koviak, 27, Alan Kimball, 46, and Dennis Jungbluth, 58. They weren't strangers to this beast. They'd fueled it, cared for it, trusted it. But sometime, around 6:30 p.m., while preparing the display for the public, the engine roared, and then it exploded. It sounded like thunder, a cannon fire cracked through the fairgrounds. People dropped their drinks, children screamed, a cloud of scalding steam. Splintered metal and charred wood shot from the engine with deadly force. The men working on the engine were thrown like dolls, their bodies ripped apart, hurled dozens of feet. One of the men was found 30 feet away. 3 were killed instantly. 1 later died at the hospital. Dozens more were wounded, pierced by debris. Burned, dazed, the Midway became a war zone. Witnesses spoke of a bomb-like blast, a sound that didn't belong in a place of joy. 2 police officers, there to issue a citation for the engine being driven on public roads, were nearly caught in the blast, their pens still in hand. The boiler had failed catastrophically. An unseen weakness, an internal flaw. It had passed inspections, but inside, age had eaten away at it, like rust in the bones. Some said the pressure gauge might have malfunctioned. Others blamed corrosion. But in the end, it didn't matter. The engine was a bomb, and no one knew it until it was too late. The fair continued the next day, but for those who were there, it never truly reopened. The 4 victims, fathers, brothers, friends, were known across Ohio's farming and machinery communities. Their deaths devastated Medina. A memorial now stands in their honor at the fairgrounds. It reads their names, but it cannot recite their screams. This legacy turned lethal. A century-old machine once used to till the land became the tool of death at a place meant for laughter. Because when you work with pressure, when you trust old steel and faded gauges, all it takes is one flaw, one moment, one hiss too many, and then the fair becomes a furnace. It was a crisp February afternoon in Clermont-Ferrand, France, the kind where wind nips at your coat. Crystal Park, a seasonal fairground nestled in the heart of the city, was alive with color, movement, and joy. Towering above the stalls and flashing lights stood the Maximum, a pendulum ride nearly 50 meters high. Riders were strapped into a circular gondola that soared, spun, and swung like a hammer in the sky, promising adrenaline and awe. And on that afternoon, it promised one young woman a thrill she would never return from. At around 4:30 p.m., a woman in her early 20s climbed aboard. She was secured by an over-the-shoulder harness and a secondary seatbelt, or so it seemed. As Maximum reached its peak arc, swinging high above the crowd, the unthinkable happened. The woman was violently ejected midair, her body hurling more than 20 meters downward. She struck the operator's control booth with sickening impact. Medics rushed in, bystanders frozen in horror. Her boyfriend, who had stayed on the ground, would later recall hearing a big, sudden, big boom, and then silence. Rescuers worked desperately. Chest compressions, oxygen, but by 5:30 p.m., it was over. She was declared dead at the scene. Police sealed off the ride. What had gone wrong? In the days that followed, the story that emerged was darker than anyone expected. Witnesses and family members claimed the harness had not been locked properly, possibly due to frayed or malfunctioning belts. An undeclared employee, allegedly responsible for checking harnesses, was nowhere to be found. He fled the scene, triggering a manhunt by investigators. Soon charges were filed. The amusement company behind Maximum was accused of involuntary manslaughter and undeclared labor. The ride operator was placed under formal judicial review. Critics called out regulators, accusing them of granting approvals without asking questions. Public anger swelled. A white march was held in memory of the victim. Fair rides were shut down in mourning, and every passerby at Crystal Park couldn't help but glance toward the now silent Maximum, its steel frame casting a long shadow over the midway. Today across the world, safety inspections are stricter, or at least they're supposed to be. Ride operators check every bolt, every restraint. Inspectors, sometimes unannounced, walk the grounds with checklists and clipboards, peering beneath platforms and scanning brake systems. But as this tragedy proved, all it takes is one missed click, one frayed strap, one person not doing their job. Appearances can be deceiving. What about the metal deep inside the ride? The parts you don't see. That's where non-deconstructive testing comes in. Using ultrasound and special dyes, inspectors can detect cracks, corrosion, or fatigue hidden beneath the layers of steel. It's like a doctor taking an X-ray of your bones, but for rides. Safety restraints have also evolved. Instead of relying on a single lap bar or seatbelt, most rides now use redundant systems. Over-the-shoulder harnesses paired with lap belts, sometimes backed by sensors that won't let the ride start unless every buckle clicks into place. And after tragedies like the Icon Park incident, some rides have sensors to prevent riders who exceed height or weight limits from boarding altogether. Operators aren't left to figure it out on their own. They undergo intensive training and certification, learning emergency protocols and how to spot the smallest safety risk. Many must pass written tests to complete ride-specific courses before they can even run the attraction. But unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. On a humid summer morning, July 6th, 2023, the Smith County Fairgrounds in South Carthage, Tennessee, buzzed with anticipation. The carnival had set up on the Ag Center line. Rides were lined, lights were off, guests hadn't arrived. Yet something ominous stirred behind the scenes. Overly Mudd, 45, a newly hired technician working for the traveling James Ging Amusement Company, was part of a crew member team. He was trusted to maintain the rides, grease bearings, and keep systems safe. Among those rides was the Gravitron, the spinning UFO-like attraction known for its centrifugal thrill, built to spin riders against the walls. At 9:30 a.m., while the ride was turned off and the generator unplugged, Oval and a small service team were manually rotating and greasing the mechanism. Somewhere between grease and ritual, a miscommunication happened. They thought the path was clear. A pole shifted, a misheard word, and suddenly, Oval was struck in the head, crushed by the rotating arm. Fatal trauma looming in an instant. He collapsed. The fair's carnival fell silent. Though the ride was not in operation, witnesses had heard something break. A thud. Mudd was dead before medical staff arrived. Emergency crews attempted life-saving measures as the crowd began filling in for the day. No one fully understood what had happened. Fair officials confirmed that Mudd was newly hired and in training. His sister would later speak out, revealing that police had informed her via Facebook several hours after his death, with no contact from the carnival or the fair staff. Tennessee's Occupational Safety and Health Administration launched an investigation. The Department of Labor's Amusement Device Unit issued a cease and desist for the ride, but a third-party inspector cleared the Gravitron for the next morning, finding no mechanical issues, allowing the ride to resume operations. When you step on the platform, the ride hums softly, a lap bar clicks into place, lights flash, music blares, and overhead the stars begin to spin. You trust the machines, you trust the operator, you trust the rules, because this is supposed to be safe, right? We live in the age of modern technology and tightened regulations. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Even now, with all that technology, people still die. So I ask why. And what I found was darker than expected. Beneath the neon glow and sugary laughter of the Midway lies a hidden underworld, one of shortcuts, deception, and greed. It's a world where safety is sometimes just a performance. Across the U.S. and beyond, investigations have uncovered fairs where operators faked inspections, forged signatures, and bribed officials to keep the rides moving, no matter the risk. In one horrifying case, a spinning carnival ride had a cracked support. The beam had worn down over time. The damage was visible, and instead of fixing it, the operators hid it, coating the cracks in grease and paint. Then they bribed an inspector to look the other way. The ride passed. Weeks later, it tore apart midair, injuring dozens. In 2015, a nationwide probe exposed carnivals operating rides with no valid inspections at all. Rusted bolts, broken restraints, welds held together by hope. Yet on paper, all clear. Some of these rides had been running for years, and these aren't isolated mistakes. They're systematic choices. Why? Money. Tight travel schedules, expensive parts, thin margins, so corners are cut, using cheap or counterfeit parts, overloading rides for more ticket sales, skipping safety checks to save time, hiring untrained, undocumented workers to assemble rides overnight. A former carnival mechanic told me how inspections sometimes took just 5 minutes. Look good? Sign it. He said warning signs like loose restraints or groaning metal were ignored until something failed or someone got hurt. Another whistleblower, once an inspector himself, described being pressured to approve rides he knew were unsafe. Quote, "If I red flag too many, they fire me, and the next guy just signs it anyway." End quote. Safety, he said, was negotiable. These aren't just missteps. They're betrayals that cost lives. The victims? Teenagers on a first date, children in line with cotton candy, families out for one good memory. They never saw it coming. So what can be done? Some states have started to act, pushing for public ride inspection records, heavier fines, criminal charges, better training. But as long as safety remains something that can be faked on paper, we're just a spinning wheel. Despite all these advanced safety measures, rigorous inspections, and strict regulations, accidents still happen. Machines fail, human error occur, and sometimes the unexpected strikes, reminding us that no matter how far technology and protocols have come, the risk is never zero. Still, around 30,000 ride-related injuries or deaths are treated in the U.S. hospitals each year. You're far more likely to be injured than killed at an amusement park or fair. While fatalities remain rare, each incident often reveals patterns of regulatory failure, hidden mechanical flaws, or human error. That's why Death Kiss Traveler explores not just the stories, but the shadows behind them. And now, I will leave you with a haunted tale of the fair. The fairgrounds have stood on that same dusty patch of earth since the late 1800s, long before the midway lights, the booths, or the sound of steel rides grinding to life. In Boise, Idaho, the fairgrounds have been in use since the late 1800s, and for nearly as long, workers have whispered stories. Stories about performers who never left, and fairgoers who died under the lights and returned in the dark. Old-timers whispered that the grounds are haunted, not by one ghost, but by many. A phantom clown is often seen peeking from behind the trailers during midnight setups. He doesn't move, doesn't smile, just watches, and then vanishes. One summer night in 2006, a food vendor named Marcus was setting up near the livestock barn. The fair didn't open for 2 more days, and the grounds were mostly empty. Just a few night crews and scattered trailers. He had an old boombox for the background noise, but when he plugged it in, it wouldn't work. Moments later, Marcus heard something chilling. Carnival music. Slow, warped, slowing down, reversing. It echoed through the barn, like an organ grinder from another century. He yanked the cord out of the outlet, but the music kept playing. Then, it just stopped. He never went near that barn at night again. Every year, just before sunrise, when the fog rolls thick across the racetrack, she appears. Always in the same place, standing alone in the morning mist, staring at the Ferris wheel like she's waiting for someone who never showed. Fairground workers call her Rosie, though no one knows her real name. She's been seen for decades, always in the early morning fog, standing silently on the racetrack, facing the Ferris wheel. Some say she died in the 1940s, trampled during a stampede at the rodeo. I couldn't find any record of it, but the older folks remember whispers, a sudden crowd surge, a girl who slipped, and the terrible sound of boots and hooves and screaming. Now when the mist is thick and the lights are still off, she returns. Same spot, same dress, just watching. And when the fog begins to lift, she fades with it. But the Ferris wheel always creaks, just once, as if it remembers her too. This is Marissa with Death Kiss Traveler. Thank you for listening. Join me next week for an all-new chilling episode at the happiest place on earth. Looking for an amazing vacation? Sunkissed Traveler can find you great deals and take the stress out of your vacation. Check description for a link or visit sun-kissedtraveler.com.